thoughts. I choose to only think right thoughts. Rumor time reflects. When my mind is upset, I can change my mindset. Do not be thrown offset. Rumor time reset. Rumor time. I choose to only think of thoughts. I choose to only think kind thoughts. I choose to only think right thoughts. Rumor time.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another ARC podcast conversation. Our conversation. I am Dr. Yvonne Marie Laria, and it is so good to be here today. We have an exciting discussion this evening, and we have an excellent, talented, amazing guest on our show today, Miss Kimberly Green Reeves. I can't wait for you guys to meet her. She's awesome lady. And the rest of the team will introduce themselves, and then I will introduce Kimberly at the end.
I live in Fargo, North Dakota. Excited now, and whoever will join us as really important conversation about mental health awareness this week.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vanessa Kelly Brew, and I am coming to you from Elkhart, Indiana, and that is the city with a heart. And so I want to say welcome to you all for joining us today. And I also want to say welcome to our guest, Kimberly Green Reeves.
Awesome. And we have Sabrina. We really do, but I don't know where she disappeared to. And so when she comes, when we can actually see her again, we will. There she is.
I don't know what happened, you guys. I'm so sorry.
Technology. Okay, go ahead and introduce yourself, Sabrina.
Hi, I'm Sabrina Taylor. I have my own boutique communications firm. And I was telling the group earlier before we all got on the line, I'm just a big fan of everything GC scored. So I'm just very happy to be here, especially to talk about mental health and public health.
Awesome. Thank you, Sabrina. And then we have, like I said earlier, we have Mrs. Kimberly Green Reeves, and she will introduce herself, tell you a little bit about who she is, and we will get into our education segment and then get right into our conversation about mental health being a public health priority.
Good evening. My name is Kimberly Green Reeves. I want to thank Dr. Larrier as well as all of the lovely women on today's podcast and the guest for having me. It is truly an honor. I am currently the Executive Director of Community Impact for Beacon Health System, which is responsible for the Community Health Outreach Division for 4 hospitals within our healthcare system. So again, happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And if we can get our educate, there we go. So GC Scored is in its 10th year. We are now in the double digits, and we are so excited to be celebrating our 10th year anniversary this year. And we can keep it moving right now. So, all right. So this is our prayer, and Sabrina, who is filling in for Geneva, we want to send good wishes and energy and prayers and thoughts to Geneva, Dr. Fleming. She is not well right now, but she is recovering. So don't get scared and worried. She is doing well.
Good. I'd love to, I have big shoes to fill. Welcoming everyone to this conversation as Geneva usually reads this, but I will try to honor her. We miss you, Geneva. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this day and for Access Rumor Time Conversations podcast. We thank you for allowing us to be chosen to be here because we are special and we matter to you. We pray that you will help us to recognize, understand, manage, express, and reflect on thoughts, interactions, mindsets, and emotions that are helpful, kind, wise, uplifting, and courageous. We pray that all who watch and listen now and in the future would experience renewed minds, transformed lives, and that they would be empowered to create safer and more socially connected communities wherever they may be. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Sabrina. You did a phenomenal job. Laverne?
GCSCAD is to renew minds, to create safer and socially connected communities.
Awesome.
So at GC Scored, we talk about social emotional wellness and health. And so what is that? It is a person's ability to recognize, understand, manage, express, and reflect on their thoughts, their interactions, their mindsets, and emotions as it relates to self, others, and situations. Effectively utilizing these competencies engages, educates, equips, and empowers individuals of all ages, stages, and locations to successfully navigate daily activities such as loving, learning, earning, relationship building, problem solving, and adapting to the demands of growth and development.
Awesome. And so the definition, rumor time, as you saw in the prayer and you saw in our definition of what social emotional wellness and health is. So the rumor time process is a 5-step cyclical, or neurocyclical, culturally responsive problem-solving strategy that is used to engage, educate, equip, and empower individuals to move from inter and intrapersonal imbalance to inter and intrapersonal balance, and from unconscious living to conscious living. At GC Scored, we have our own definition, our own manifesto or blueprint of what mental health is. And here it is. We view mental health from a social, ecological, cognitive, behavioral, and emotional perspective. We believe that to achieve triadic balance, we must intentionally and consciously integrate the roots, such as relational capacity building skills and the conditions which we all live in different conditions at home, school, we go to work, we play, we worship, we pray. And so we look at those conditions, we look at the resources at home, at school, at work, and in the community in order for healthy growth and development to occur. We interpret many symptoms, behaviors, feelings, labels, and diagnoses as fruits, outgrowths, and manifestations of the activities happening at and around the root level. So that is our definition of mental health. We want to advertise the Center for Community Justice. They're having their 45th anniversary Restorative Justice Awards dinner on Saturday, October 21st. Tickets are available. If you are unable to attend, you can make a donation. There's a QR code right here. We are supporting other organizations in our community to further the work of wholeness. That's basically what we're doing, furthering the work of wholeness. So thank you, CCJ, Center for Community Justice, which is headquartered in Elkhart, Indiana. All right. Awesome. We also had the GC Squad is having a workshop. Could we get that? The Pathways Home. That's right. Pathways Home. This is giving visibility and voice to the unhoused. And we are going to be having a workshop, a hybrid workshop on October 26th, Thursday, October 26th, from 10 to 1. This, you can register. It is $75 per person. Please register. This is a population or demographic that we need as much support. Those who are supporting the unhoused need to know how to do that effectively. That population, the unhoused population, is growing by leaps and bounds. And GC Scored wants to share some strategies and some techniques on how to work with the unhoused. So again, October 26th from 9, I think 10 to 1. All right. You will see this coming up on the screen throughout the evening. Okay. Let's get into it. So what is public health? Sabrina, what's your question for Kimberly? Kick us off with a question. We're not hearing you, Sabrina.
This technology today, I'm sorry, that was my fault. I hit mute. But you started by saying there is no public health without mental health.
There's no physical health.
Without physical health. Could everyone on the panel, but specifically you, Dr. Larrier and Kimberly, could you please elaborate on how interconnected these two aspects of health really are?
I will give way to Kimberly.
All right. So yes, the World Health Organization says that there is no physical health without mental health. And so when we think about that in the work that I do, we acknowledge that if you're going to see improvement in health outcomes, you have to take care of the whole person, and that includes their mental state as well. You think about what they may be going through and where they are emotionally, spiritually, and you have to acknowledge that. And we often say, meet people where they are. That is exactly what you're doing at that point. I'm really trying to understand socially and emotionally where they are, so that they can do what is necessary to be a part of their overall health and wellness outcome. And so that really is engaging with an individual, understanding what they may be facing, and being able to what I like to say is be a buffer, if you will, and a advocate and navigator to ensure that they're getting all of the supports that they need to be able to have that healthy outcome. That may look like they need to change behavior. So oftentimes we used to say, you know what, we're going to put a program in place around obesity. Right. And we've all been there, and I can only speak for myself. When I get ready to do all the things, and I may have, a workout machine right downstairs, in my basement. But mentally, if I'm not there, if I'm not ready to jump on that and put a plan in place and to do all the things because I am bogged down by all the stressors of life, I'll never get to that point, right? And so it's acknowledging that we have to start there, and we say empower someone, have engaged with them in a way that it's defined as motivational interviewing, if you will, while they get to be a part of some of those decisions and they see the value themselves. But there is a technique to that on this end when you need to engage someone in that space, but that has to be a part of their of their healthcare plan when addressing their physical health. So that is what's meant when we say that there is no there is no physical health without mental health. And then there is some truth to that too when you're looking at the actual true health aspect of that and the implications that someone may face because mental health weighs on you. It can cause cardiovascular disease. It can cause different types of mental illness when you're not addressing the mental state. And we can get into all of that, but there's a lot of stuff, a lot of meat on that bone to get into. But there is some truth to that, especially when you're looking at ACEs and trauma in ways that shows up and how that causes someone to get into risky behaviors or restructure someone's brain architecture. And so now, this is becoming their norm. And so we have to work on that and change that again to make sure that there are healthier outcomes. So that's a lot on that that I gave you there to consider, but that's what that means. And so grateful that that we're having that conversation and that's upfront for everyone to acknowledge and begin to put some things in place to work through.
Yeah. Thank you. And I will add to that. We have a quote that says, as air is to life, so are social emotional skills or competencies to relationships. They are like the air we breathe. And that is our equivalent to what the World Health Organization says. There is no physical health without mental health. Social emotional competencies, they are the building blocks of our whole existence. It's like the air we breathe. We need air to be alive. We need social emotional, healthy social emotional skills to have relationships, to maintain and establish connections, social connections, so that we don't stay in a state of isolation. And we know that the most recent public health, the U.S. Surgeon General talked about the increase in isolation and social disconnect and how it is impacting us physically, right? And that is a real-time illustration of the connection between physical health and mental health as well as social health. Okay, so as air is to life, so are social emotional competencies to relationships. They are like the air we breathe. So that's my response to that one.
Well, I mean, just one quick follow-up to that. I know, Kimberly, I was hearing you speak earlier, and how you discussed the need for a paradigm shift in how healthcare systems approach mental health. I guess this question goes back to the two of you again, starting with Kimberly. What specific changes do you believe are necessary? Or I know we're getting into the meat really fast, but what are some of the changes? And then specifically for you, Dr. Larry, you work GCSCAD does so much with educational institutions. How is that surviving this paradigm shift that needs to happen for us to really start prioritizing mental health wherever we are?
Right. So one of the things that we have been doing, and with educational institutions, but just across the spectrum of human life, the lifespan, is paying attention to the language that we use, right? Because words have power. And so one of the things that we do is initially we moved away from using the language of mental health and started using the words social emotional. Right? We talked about social emotional as foundational. Those are the building blocks. The social emotional competencies, the core 5 social emotional competencies, are the building blocks of mental health. And the outcomes of those building blocks are what we would call emotional stability, emotional wellness, mental health, mental wellness. Without those, you have on the other side of the spectrum, you have mental illness. And mental illness is not a static thing. It's dynamic and it goes across spectrums, right? It goes across the spectrum. And so what are we doing? We changed the language. Now we see that there's a lot of politicization of social emotional. And so we've changed the language again, right? Because again, as we said earlier in our pre-show, we talked about it's a long game. Kimberly talked about it's a long game. And how do we stay in the game and stay relevant so that we can provide, empower, educate, equip, and empower people so that they can problem solve themselves. We have to change the language. We have to change the perspective. How do we see mental health? Is mental health something that is only relegated to the medical profession? Or is mental health something that we each own? It's my story, right? My mental health is my story. And one of the things that GC Score does is we try to make sure that we first and foremost change the language surrounding people's stories. We definitely stay away from pathologizing individual stories. So when somebody comes in to talk with us, or when we are training individuals, we talk about a story. We don't talk about a presenting problem. And I've said here, and I've said it in my classes, nobody gives you the right to say that my story is a problem. You don't get the right to label my story as a problem. It's my story. And so the language is critical, and that language changes. We have to start using the language to change the mindsets and to change the narrative around what people's experiences, their daily activities are. And so those are some of the things that GC Squad is doing. Again, the framework is based in agriculture so that it opens it up to everyone. Just as agriculture is open to everyone, all of us have access to air, we have access to water, we have access to trees. We should all have access to our story and to getting strategies to help us navigate successfully our life. Did that answer the question? Okay, so let's keep going. Laverne, you had a question for me?
We're focused on mental health and mental wellness today, but I know that public health and a lot. I just want you to zoom out, then we can come back in so that we can talk more about what you do on a daily basis. So give us a little bit of a big picture of what public health encompasses your position.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So public health in my position, the short of it is that we prevent disease and promote health. But when we're looking at that, we are looking at the community as a whole in some aspect in terms of what are the various factors that are impacting someone's overall health and wellness. But then we're also looking at it for how we're defining a population or how we're defining a community. And so it may be that we're looking at communities of color. It may be that we're looking at different age groups or genders, et cetera. But even from there, we tend to, in my world, look at public health as, again, a long game. Understanding that we are starting with building awareness. So then that is, how do we make someone aware that this is an issue or that this would be helpful to them? And then from there, how do you move into knowledge, ensuring that you have a consistent message and a consistent way to educate a community or a population around a specific health topic or a risk factor. And then from knowledge, you're moving into behavior change. You know, we say now that you know better, you do better. And it's certainly easier said than done. There's a lot that goes into that. But ultimately, if we're going to see true health outcomes or impact, we want to ensure that everyone has the tools and the resources available to them that are going to help them change their behavior. And then we begin to see impact in true health outcomes. And so in public health, that could take anywhere from 3 to 10 years. More like 10 years, you know, looking at true impact across a community. And so that is public health in my world.
And so in your today, you interacting with individuals in the community groups, how does your position allow you to create those public health connections?
Yes, we're doing both and. In my position, it's important for me that I am aware of individuals' experiences, not only from the staff that I have the privilege of, leading and guiding, if you will. And oftentimes they lead me, which is why I need to be on the front lines and understanding what they're experiencing, but also from a patient or a client perspective, having that experience and understanding. And I say it's important too, when looking at how I deliver a message to my leadership team. I want to understand the data from a quantitative perspective, but I also want to receive it from a qualitative perspective. You need both and. And so those stories that Dr. Learier spoke about are very important when trying to drive home a point, when really getting someone to see if we're able to make this shift, this paradigm shift that was referenced earlier. Let me take you down their road. Let me help you understand what they're experiencing so that you can just get the human element out of it. Oftentimes, it's easy to just look at things from a bottom line perspective, but we forget that we are all humans, and that's important to the work that we're in. And then part of my job is also advocating and speaking to leadership about important topics, and also being that voice that says, I hear you when you say do this, but, have you considered looking at something differently? One of the things that we've done recently is look at mental health differently. And so mental health is not simply a disease, but it is all the things, that are outside of that as well. Meaning, what are those social and emotional factors that we need to pay attention to? What are the toxic stressors in someone's life that impacts their overall health and wellness that are just as important? And then again, those social determinants of health, right? And oftentimes, even when you're dealing with mental health, you have to acknowledge there are these other factors that are at play. And so again, we look at the person as a whole and not just the primary issue, but some of those things that influence those primary issues that are just as important. And so again, just to wrap it all up, I am both and on the front lines in the community at times, and then also within the healthcare system, having those conversations as well. And on the public, in the community, I am comfortable and again, privileged and feel that it is often my duty to advocate for individuals that don't have the platform that I have. And so I am not opposed to speaking as well.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Kimberly. So we just want to acknowledge our viewing audience and just read some of the comments that we have so far. Lois Lynn, we thank you for being such a devoted and committed viewer of the ARC podcast. And so you just are giving greetings to us all, and we also appreciate you being here. We also see Carolyn here. And Carolyn talked a little bit about the social emotional competencies, and she likes the quote, the social emotional competency is like air to relationships. And so she commented that there's no physical health without mental health, and there's no public health without physical health. So thank you.
And then there's Kathy Purnell. She says, I like that approach, the story.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, and I want to go to, thank you, Vanessa. I want to kind of continue with what Kimberly was saying. We're talking about stories. And you shared a story earlier. And Laverne, could you frame that question? Could you set that question up for Kimberly for me? You know what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah, well, just speaking of story, sometimes we are the data as people. So I just ask you people a story where you've had some kind of breakthrough. Like, I just don't understand what you're doing, and then you had a conversation, and you're like, oh, that person says, no.
Yeah, I can, yes, I can definitely share that story. I was recently brought in or made aware of some concerns that our sickle cell program has at our healthcare system. And, really, until you are able to hear it from them, and understand it, are you able to then have a meaningful dialogue with some of the leaders? And so I went to a conversation or a dinner, if you will, with some of our sickle cell patients, and they were just sharing at that time that they were struggling when they would come to our ERs to get service, because they were accused of being drug addicts because they were in pain. And for those of you who are not aware, when you have sickle cell disease, you often have to get many, many blood transfusions. And you are often in pain more times than not, and you're just seeking relief and comfort, and certainly not a drug seeker for the simple sake of being a drug seeker. You're looking for any sort of remediation or healing in that way. And so that's demoralizing for anyone that shows up at our ER. And so because of that, we decided to have a conversation with our CEO and our chief medical officer. And it's tough because they're looking at the bottom line. And how many providers do we have in that space, and how many more we're going to need in order to be able to give these patients the attention and care that they need. But thankfully, after many, many conversations, they came back to us and said, hey, we understand. And not only that, not only do we want to continue to support and help the sickle cell program, we also want to make sure that we're doing things differently in our ERs, and so if you're aware of any program where we can provide our providers and some of our frontline workers education, let's talk about that. If you want to come and have a conversation with our clinical excellence team, please do that. And so for us, that was huge. That was a big win. And again, that's part of, not simply allowing things to happen because it's always done that way. They're never going to listen to you. But just saying, hey, enough's enough to do different things. We need to be a better caring organization and really lean into what our mission statement says when it says that we connect with heart, right? And so challenge them on that. We're able to see some great outcomes as a result of it.
That's awesome. I love that story.
As a result of here, or that's
we were
the long game that we're doing.
Actually, we were able to make changes. We were able to identify additional providers because what we were experiencing with that was the healthcare providers at that time felt overwhelmed because there were no transitional doctors from pediatric to adult. patients for sickle cell patients. And so we were able to identify some additional physicians that would see sickle cell patients. So they didn't have to hire new providers. They could just acknowledge the providers that were willing to see them. And then we were also able to pursue additional funding through a grant that allowed us to hire some additional support staff, a nurse, as well as community health worker, to be available to sickle cell patients. And so absolutely, that's one of those, that's an example, Laverne, where we were able to see change a lot sooner. And thank goodness it did not take us 10 years to get there.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I
I know
love that. So, I'm sorry. What I also love about that is you had to tap into the fact that the providers also need care, right? Certain social people, but they're for all of us.
As air is to life. Yeah, that's awesome. I love that story. And another way that we could, because those are the places where GC Scored will can come in and educate, right? I have a very close friend. Her both children, her both daughters are sickle cell. They have sickle cell, and so I understand. I mean, I lived through the crises and the multiple transfusions and the pain, and it is heart-rending. And we know sickle cell is mainly found in people of color, especially Black people. And so there are several layers to sickle cell. And the fact that you guys were able to, Kimberly, you were able to see the problem, recognize the problem, help the administrators to understand it, and found ways to manage it. That's a win. That is a win for everyone, because it brings it while it identifies some weaknesses in the area of the medical staff and practitioners. It provided a way for them to solve it, right? You're not just identifying the issue, but you're also providing a solution.
That's right. That's right. Yes, and I want to acknowledge my team for doing that. You know, I support them. I'm behind the scenes, but they are the true heroes in this particular instance, because they continue to fight and advocate. And I think one of the aha moments for me, sometimes we want to do it on our own. You can't.
You can't.
Right? So one of the things that we learned with this is that we had to find a physician that understood, you know, and could talk that, you know, language, and have those conversations in spaces where physicians hear it from other physicians, you know, and so they open their ears a little bit more, maybe even respect it a little bit more, because it's coming from them. And it doesn't mean that you're any less, you know, of importance than them, but you just understand who you need to have at the table to have those conversations, so that you can continue to move the work forward.
Yeah.
Kimberly, has it been harder to make the case in public mental health? So now I'm down to our conversation. Sometimes it seems like it's easier, or has been easier for physical health, and not easy to make the case for health of the public health. So how have you been navigating that?
Yeah, so that's certainly an issue, right? And I think, you know, when you think about mental health, and you think about those indicators and metrics that you want to move, you know, mental health it's an individualized, you know, medical condition that is harder to measure success in. And how do you measure how someone feels,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And be able to show the needle move on that.
Mhm.
And so, you know, we have been, when I came into the organization back in 2012, mental health was a priority. That's what keeps this going, because the community, when I say that, we do a community health needs assessment every 3 years. And so we're looking at our key informants. And so those are stakeholders that actually engaging with individuals, you know, day to day, vulnerable and at-risk populations that have some insight. We're looking at secondary data. We are looking at the CDC and the Census Bureau. We're looking at the Indiana State Department of Health data and places data, as well as our electronic health record data. And then lastly, we're taking it to the community and we're asking them. And so they're saying that mental health should be a priority. It has become the #1 priority for our community, for our region since 2012. And so one of the things that we cannot do is to turn a blind eye, because we struggle to measure success, and it doesn't mean that we shouldn't address it, right? And so this paradigm shift that we're starting to see when we're looking at mental health again is how else does it show up? So now we're starting to have those conversations about social and emotional, you know, components and what that means. And we're talking about toxic stress, and we're talking about ACEs and trauma now. But when it comes to physicians, you know, they're scientists at heart, right? And so what do you mean, you know, when you say acute trauma? I mean, when you're talking about trauma, they think acute, right? They're thinking about a bad fall or a bad
Right.
accident. They're not thinking about some of these intangible things that they can't see,
Mhm.
right? And so thankfully, they are starting to acknowledge that and the importance of that in someone's overall health and wellness. And so we are starting to look at mental health differently and have the conversation about what does it mean to be an organization that acknowledges social and emotional competencies, and it acknowledges trauma-informed care and how that shows up in community health, as well as, you know, our healthcare system as a whole.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, you know, for the longest I've had this, I've been thinking about the way we see mental health in such an isolated, pathologized way. Um, when as an individual, we are social beings,
Yeah.
and and our environment and genetics, yes, informs our who we are. And for systems to not consider the factors and elements in our history, in our contemporary times, in terms of uh, what is happening in my home, what is happening in my school, what is happening in the community, what is happening nationwide, what is happening globally, to make diagnoses or to make treatment plans that are so isolated and disconnected from a person's lived experience is not best practice. Let me just say it like that. It's just not best practice. You cannot give me a diagnosis based on just one aspect of my life. You can't do that. You shouldn't do that. And so I'm happy to know that in our local area here, that your organization and your division is making some strides toward looking at the whole person within their context of growth and development.
Thank you.
All right. I'd like to just add to that or continue this conversation a little bit further and just ask Kimberly, what is it that each of us individually can do to just help further when it comes or push that needle when it comes to making like policies and including the individual in that.
Yeah, yeah. So I always say we are all experts in our own right and can contribute to this ever moving but so important topic here. And part of what we believes important is just that we are a connection for someone. So even at the core, right, before we get into what we do professionally or here today, with GC Scored as an individual, we can all be a buffer for someone, right? We can be there for them. One of the questions that we began asking and measuring on a regional level is, does an individual or do you personally have someone that you can reach out to, one or two trusted adults of your youth or one or two trusted individuals? We know that there's a shortage in even getting medical care for mental health. And so having someone that you can go to is just as important. To be there, we're all protective factors, right? We can all play a role in that, and so that is certainly important. And yes, Vanessa, being an advocate is certainly important too. And we talk about the system, right? In public health, what I haven't touched on much is that there is the policy aspect of it, right? When you think about the systemic change that needs to happen, it's very important that we understand the policies that are influencing some of the programs, that are being put in place, or the ones that are not able to be put in place. We talked about social and emotional learning being challenged, in the schools and in different public forums. And so how do we come together and navigate that accordingly? And how do you ensure that you're having the conversations that you need to have with some of our policymakers so that they're able to advocate for you on the Hill, right? And so in some of the work that we do, we find ourselves doing just that. And that's important as an individual. And I have to be mindful too that I walk a fine line, that people see me, they see my organization and not me as an individual. So oftentimes I have to reach out to my leadership and say, hey, am I able to speak about this, one, from representing the organization, or would you prefer as an individual that I'm, having this conversation? And so one recently was just around maternal and infant health, and where we see the women of color. Black women are 3 times infant mortality, 3 times higher for women of color, Black women in particular, than we do any other race. And so let's talk about that. Let's talk about why. In mental health, we see where Black individuals sometimes are diagnosed with these harsher, if you will, mental diseases, where other people that are not of color are diagnosed with things such as a eating disorder, or a sleep disorder, just something that
adjustment disorder.
Right? Yeah. So that when someone's looking at their record, you're going to see that as opposed to something else, and want to quickly label them like that, right? And so again, Vanessa, yes, we have an individual role as well, but it does take a community. And it does take, it takes power sometimes behind that. And so you have to understand when you as an individual can make change, but then also what does it mean to mobilize a community and get everyone around a topic to make change as well. And who needs to be at the table for that to happen. So there's a both and.
Yeah, I want to push just a little further on that one, Kimberly, and ask, like, how do people know the difference? Because it can feel very like overwhelming when you are just the individual, and you can feel sometimes like my voice doesn't matter. Yes, I know my own story, but who is going to want to hear my story?
Mm.
And who do I talk to, or what people, how do I know, like, when it's time for me to like come together as a community? And even so, how do I do that?
Yeah, yeah. I always say you know when you know, right? So as an individual, you never want to push someone into telling their story before they're ready for their story to be told. And so we acknowledge that. We have to respect that. But then when they get to the point where they want to tell that story and get out in front, it's all about being visible. Right. And so I would encourage them to look up their public health organizations in their area. One is pretty much most hospitals have, or health systems have, a community outreach arm, whether they have their own department or it's through their marketing department. There is that. There's that way to communicate, and they should all have a way to communicate in as well. And then there's also the public health department. And then there are just other organizations. Our libraries have lots of information and have lots of community organizations that have meetings there. And so you can start to peruse some of those sites and see where they're having some of these conversations. There's a lot of other organizations, public, they're non-for-profit organizations that are also having similar conversations. And so it's showing up sometimes. And it's like my daughter says, Mom, I got to be brave today. And I say, yes, baby, you have to be brave. Right? So you'll know that when it's time to tell your story, when you feel like, you know what, I need to do this, not only for me, but for others. I need to change. I need to create this change, or be the change that I want to see. So then you start to just you start to tell your story, and often you find that people are connected, and so it takes off from there. But it does take courage. I say to sometimes lead differently. And so and then too, I'm a woman of faith, so I believe that God covers us and He orders our steps. And so when you can lean into that, that change will start to happen. You'll start to see that you're able to make these connections and network with individuals to start to see the paradigm shift that you're hopeful for.
Yeah, awesome.
Thank you for that.
And one of the things that you said earlier is you can't do this work alone, and you absolutely cannot. And GC Squad's tagline is "Every piece matters," and we take that literally, because we know that every story is different, and the people that you can reach, Kimberly, I may not be able to reach. The people that I can reach, you may not be able to reach, or Vanessa may not be able to reach. And so if we have the outcome, if our outcome is the same, we should look at all the pieces as part of a puzzle that is going to create a beautiful picture at the end. How we get there, I may find the ends of the puzzle. You may find the outies or the innies, whatever they call them, in the puzzle pieces. But the goal is to put it together to create a beautiful picture. And we should all work. I believe we should really all try to work together to help individuals become, because as we know, there's a shortage of mental health practitioners across the globe. One of GC Squad's our number one goal is to increase access. And one of the ways we want to do that is to educate people, the social emotional first aid, making sure that individuals in their homes, in their communities, in the schools, like we said, have you call it buffers, right? And our goal is to train people, regular people. In public health, is called task sharing or task shifting, so that they can help each other problem solve and live life, in the best way that they know how. But we have to equip people, because people are not able to get to the trained, the mental health practitioners. So we have to find ways to make sure that people are getting the help they need, and not giving up, or and showing up in ways that are less than healthy for them and for society. All right. So yes, Sabrina, what is your final question? We're into the end. We're coming
Yes.
up to the end of
Um, Kimberly, you've given us so much today to think about. I guess before we wrap up, knowing that Tuesday is Mental Health Awareness Day, I believe.
global mental
Global
health.
Mental Health Awareness
Mhm.
Day. What would you like to leave us with thinking about as
Yeah.
we're celebrating and acknowledging, or maybe even being a buffer for somebody on that day, or being visible on that day?
Mhm. I think the big thing that I find myself saying often is it's okay to not be okay,
Mhm.
right? And give someone permission to just be. There are a lot of things happening in the world today, in our own personal spaces, in our professional spaces, and so just acknowledging that, and then following up with we can all be a protective factor for someone. And it doesn't cost a thing. That's the beautiful thing about, I think, what GC Score brings, and the conversation that's happening in the community. There are formal and informal supports, and as Dr. Leria mentioned, it's a little bit harder to get to those formal supports. There's a shortage of mental health providers and practitioners. But that being said, there's some informal things that we can do as well. So just being there for someone, reading to someone, taking someone shopping, to the grocery store that day. If someone bumps into you, taking a pause and not getting angry that day. There's just so many things that you can do, because every little bit matters. And so I just acknowledge those informal supports on on Global Mental Health Day, and how we all have access to that, and can show someone what that looks like, and be that protective factor for them.
Mhm.
Thank you so much. And
Thank you.
Dr. Larrier and Laverne and Vanessa, I'd really love to hear what you guys would like everyone else to take from this conversation.
So what I would like everyone to take from this conversation is that we're all part of this public health. We all have mental health, whether we have a mental illness or not. We all have a mental health. We all have mental health. And I believe it is our responsibility to understand that, even though we are part of the public, right? When you hear public health, you are part of the public. Each of us is part of the public. And so it is our responsibility to see our value, and to also see the value of the other, the social other.
Mhm.
And when we have that understanding, when we start seeing ourselves as valuable, then that will radiate out to others. And my goal and my hope, and the work that GC Score does, is to help and get people engaged in that conversation, engaged in that mindset shift, engaged in that way of seeing themselves and seeing the social other, so that all of those factors will help us to have healthier mindsets, healthier ways of interacting, healthier ways of managing our emotions, healthier ways of understanding that, we have over 60,000 thoughts a day, and 80% of which are negative. Giving individuals, regular people like you and me and my mom and others, giving them that power to know that I am part of the public. I matter. I matter. So that's what I would like to have communicated.
Laverne, Vanessa.
Kimberly, I love the story that you shared, where you the holder of the story and you brought that story to other people who hear it. So I hope that everyone listening now is a holder of stories. Share.
Mm. Yeah.
And so, much like Laverne, one of the things that I really would like for people to know is that they each have a story,
Mm-hmm.
and their story is theirs to tell the way they would like it to be told.
Exactly.
And much like what Dr. Larrier was saying, this gives people a sense of empowerment to know that they matter.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I want people to know, is they have a right to tell their own story the way they want it to be told.
Mm-hmm.
So
Awesome. 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 All right. Well, this wraps up our conversation for this afternoon.
It always
Sabrina,
goes
did
by
you want to
so
say
fast.
something?
No, it just goes by so fast.
It does. It does. And there's so much more we want to talk about. And we thank Kimberly. We usually kind of do like a one-liner. What do you want? What's the one thing you want to say that you think you didn't get to say during the show? Just 30 seconds.
I just want to give GC Scored a shout out and thank you for this work. It is a long game in 10 years. Congratulations. I want to celebrate you and just tell you to keep going. Grateful to have you in our community.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I want to let people know that GC Scored is return 10, and we're also going to be growing up and moving out. So we're going to be opening up we're going to be having our ribbon cutting event ceremony and open house on October 16th from noon to 6. Yay. So
yes.
we're double digits now. And so we think we're
Yes.
grown. So we're getting our own space. And we're excited about that. And we also have on the 26th, like I said, Pathways Home, giving visibility and voice to the unhoused. It's a hybrid workshop. We really look forward to having the space full and, educating, equipping, and empowering individuals. So that's what I want to say. Laverne, Sabrina, what do you want to say?
Oh,
I just want to say,
stand on my story. It's all about the
It's all about the story.
and last thing I would want to say is a call to action. I think Kimberly has been so helpful in breaking down how we all can be active on Tuesday and every other day, honestly, whether it's, for example, not reacting, take a minute to give back or to assist somebody who might need it. And that way we can make Global Mental Health Awareness Day everyday thing. If we can just all do a little bit. We're all trained to recycle. So now let's train ourselves to be a little bit kinder and more opening to what other people might be going through and how they're writing their stories.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you all for coming. Just to let everyone know, on October 22nd, our guest would be Dr. Melita Murray Carney, the author of Who Cares? And we're going to have her on. She's a clinical psychologist on the East Coast. And so we're going to have her on here as well. So thank you all for coming. Continue in the work that you're doing. We hope that you have taken something away from from here today that will begin to be a buffer and also a support for others. Have a great evening. Thanks again, everyone.
Bye.
I choose to only think of thoughts. I choose to only think I'm God's. I choose to only think right thoughts. RUMERTIME reflects. When my mind is upset, I can change my mindset. Do not be thrown offset. RUMERTIME.
The RUMERTIME process, and I came across this quote: behind every behavior is a belief.
Whatever setting you go to, whether you're at church, whether you're at school, whether you may be having
I was
an issue
able
at home.
to analyze a little bit more.
Bringing about real positive
In order for me
changes.
to be effective, I have to be reflective. And this training
I gather an appreciation for reflecting. And I
take it from just something that's inside to getting it in a tangible form, getting it out from.
Fulfilling and rewarding to see the kids who coming and they see growth in them. They became more reflective in their thinking, to see children grow and not just see but to be a part of it.
What I have learned in camp about RUMERTIME is that it's a process for solving problems we face in our lives.
My stress, and then I begin to enjoy and spend time on the things that really make me happy. And
recommend this training to all age, from kindergarten.
before you do that thing that you'll regret, or say that thing.
If you breathe and think, you should have this training.
I would recommend this to everyone.